The observatory dome stood silent under the triple moons of Xerex Prime. Inside, Kellen Varn hunched over ancient star charts, his slender fingers tracing patterns that no one else had bothered to examine for centuries. His silver-tinted eyes, characteristic of the Varnic species, reflected the holographic displays surrounding him, each showing fragments of what the Xerex Confederacy called historical anomalies. But Kellen knew better. These weren't anomalies. They were deliberate omissions. Accessing restricted archive Theta 96, he whispered to the terminal. The computer hesitated, its loyalty protocols visibly conflicting with Kellen's high-level academic credentials. Warning: content classified under Xerex Preservation Act. Continue. Kellen glanced at the door. His unauthorized research would mean imprisonment if discovered. Or worse. Continue, he commanded. The hologram flickered, revealing fragmentary records dating back nearly 5 millennia. Star systems once inhabited, then mysteriously abandoned. Technologies that appeared in historical records, then vanished without explanation. And most intriguing, references to a species called humans. According to official Xerex doctrine, humans were mythological creatures invented to frighten young ones. Violent, unpredictable beings who once challenged the natural order of the galaxy before their inevitable extinction. Just legends to explain unexplored regions and technological dark ages. But Kellen had found too many inconsistencies, too many redacted documents, too many star systems declared off-limits for stellar instability that showed no signs of such phenomena. Display all references to Earth origin system, Kellen instructed. No such system exists in records, the computer replied. Kellen smiled thinly. Display all quarantine zones established between galactic years 7,000 to 7,500. This time, the computer complied. A cluster of star systems in the galaxy's outer spiral arm illuminated, each surrounded by warning symbols. The quarantine had been maintained for over 4,000 years. Why maintain a quarantine for a species that doesn't exist? Kellen muttered. He downloaded the data to his personal device, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. For 3 years, he had been building this case, that the most powerful entity in the known galaxy, the Xerex Confederacy, which governed 3,000 species across countless worlds, was systematically erasing all evidence of an entire civilization. The Xerex had ruled for millennia by controlling knowledge itself. Their vast libraries contained the collected wisdom of the galaxy, carefully curated to support their continued dominance. As a senior archivist, Kellen had access that few others possessed, and he had used it to piece together what might be the greatest historical cover-up ever perpetrated. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. Dawn was approaching. Soon, the great library would fill with other scholars and officials. Kellen quickly closed his terminal, wiping all traces of his search, and slipped the data device into his innermost pocket. As he stepped outside, the sprawling capital of Xerex Prime spread before him, a city of crystalline towers and ancient stone monuments stretching to the horizon. For millennia, it had stood as the galaxy's center of learning and governance. But Kellen now saw it differently, as the epicenter of a massive deception. Scholar Varn, a voice called from behind him. Kellen turned to see his mentor, Elder Thaxis, approaching with his characteristic slow, deliberate stride. The ancient Xerex's translucent skin had long ago lost its youthful blue tinge, now faded to pale white with age. His eyes, however, remained sharp. Working through the night again? Thaxis asked, mandibles clicking with concern. The continuity ceremony is tomorrow. You should rest. The continuity ceremony, a grand event where Kellen would be formally inducted into the Order of Historical Truth, binding him to the official narratives forever. Once he took those vows, any further unauthorized research would be considered not just criminal, but sacrilege. I'm just eager to complete my preparations, Kellen replied carefully. Thaxis studied him. You've been distant lately. The High Council has noticed. A chill ran through Kellen. The High Council noticed nothing without purpose. I've been absorbed in my research, he said. The pre-Confederation era contains many, Inconsistencies. All eras contain inconsistencies, young one. That's why we have the order, to create coherence from chaos. Faxis placed a gnarled hand on Kellen's shoulder. Remember our purpose. Knowledge must serve stability. Some truths are too dangerous to be widely known. With that, the elder glided away, leaving Kellen with the uncomfortable feeling that his activities might not be as secret as he'd hoped. He needed to accelerate his plans. After the ceremony, his access to unrestricted archives would be permanently monitored. Whatever evidence remained about the human species, he needed to find it now. As Kellen hurried through the morning streets toward his dwelling, he failed to notice the shadow that detached itself from a nearby column and followed silently behind him. In his modest apartment, Kellen activated his personal security field before extracting his hidden research. Holographic images sprang to life around him. Star charts, fragmentary records, and most precious of all, what appeared to be images of the mythical humans themselves. Bipedal, remarkably similar to several known species, yet with distinct characteristics. According to the fragments he'd assembled, humans had once controlled an expansive territory. They were technologically advanced, culturally prolific, and then nothing. A gap in the records spanning nearly a century, followed by their complete absence from official history. Kellen had formulated a theory. The Xerex Confederacy hadn't just written humans out of history. They had attempted to eradicate them. But what if they hadn't succeeded? What if, somewhere in the vast quarantine zones, remnants of humanity still existed? His communication terminal suddenly chimed with an emergency frequency. Across the city, similar alarms would be sounding. Kellen quickly concealed his research and activated the public channel. The stern face of Archon Vex Zarati, supreme leader of the Confederacy, materialized before him. Behind the Archon stood the 12 members of the High Council, their expressions grave. Citizens of the Confederacy, the Archon began, his deep voice resonating with authority. A security alert has been issued for all central systems. Our long-range sensors have detected an anomalous signal originating from the Othra system, a region long quarantined due to stellar instability. Kellen's pulse quickened. Othra, one of the systems in his research quarantine zone. The signal, continued the Archon, contains patterns suggesting artificial origin. A scientific expedition has been dispatched to investigate and neutralize any potential threat. Citizens are advised to continue their normal activities. The Confederacy protects all. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Kellen staring at empty space. An artificial signal from a supposedly uninhabited system under quarantine for millennia? This was no coincidence. He quickly accessed his personal terminal, bypassing security protocols to search for more information about the mysterious signal. Nothing appeared on public channels, but Kellen's privileged access revealed classified alert notifications. The signal contained what appeared to be an ancient encoding system and fragments of a language that matched no known species in the Confederacy database. Kellen's hands trembled as he accessed one final restricted file. There, buried under layers of security, was a partial decryption of the signal's content. Most was unintelligible, but one word stood out clearly. Earth, the mythical homeworld of humanity, a planet whose very existence had been erased from Confederacy records. Kellen knew what he had to do. The scientific expedition would be no such thing. It would be a military force sent to eliminate whatever had sent that signal before the wider galaxy learned of its existence. If he wanted proof of his theories, he needed to be on that expedition. Using his archival credentials, he quickly located the expedition's details. The research vessel Astral Inquiry would depart from the orbital dock within 6 hours, carrying a contingent of scientists, security personnel, and Confederacy observers. Most importantly, it required a historical archivist, a role for which Kellen was eminently qualified. Within an hour, he had fabricated the necessary authorizations and transferred himself to the expedition roster. It meant missing his continuity ceremony, effectively ending his career and marking him as a defector. But if he found what he suspected waited in the Othra system, such concerns would be irrelevant. As the transport carried him to the orbital dock, Kellen looked back at the gleaming spires of Xerex Prime. For 5,000 years, the Confederacy had maintained its dominance through control of information. If humans still existed, if they had survived whatever catastrophe the Xerex had engineered, then everything about the galactic order might be about to change. The Astral Inquiry was not what Kellen had expected. Rather than a scientific vessel, it was clearly a warship disguised with research appendages. The scientific team consisted of military personnel with only basic training in exploratory protocols. And most tellingly, in the vessel's secure hold sat a payload that could only be described as a planet killer, a gravimetric weapon capable of collapsing a star. This wasn't an expedition. It was an extermination. Archivist Varn, the ship's commander, a rigid Xerexi military officer named Drav Corzin, acknowledged him coldly as he boarded. Your addition to our roster was unexpected. Knowledge serves the Confederacy, Kellen replied with the traditional phrase, hoping his nervousness wasn't evident. Indeed, Corzin said, his compound eyes studying Kellen intently. You will observe and record, nothing more. The Author system presents unique documentation challenges that require archival expertise. Translation: you will create the official narrative explaining why we destroyed whatever we find. The journey to Othra would take 3 days through the Confederate hyperspace network. Kellen spent most of that time in his quarters, reviewing his research and preparing for whatever they might discover. The signal continued to broadcast, unchanged, a continuous beacon that seemed almost like a warning. On the 3rd day, as they prepared to exit hyperspace at the edge of the Othra system, Kellen was summoned to the bridge. The viewports showed the swirling colors of hyperspace, soon to give way to normal space. Archivist, Commander Corzin said without preamble, you will document everything you observe. The official record must be comprehensive. What exactly are we expecting to find? Kellen asked. Corzin's mandibles tightened, the Xerexi equivalent of a frown. An automated beacon, most likely. Ancient technology occasionally reactivates. Our task is to neutralize it and ensure the quarantine remains intact. And if it's not automated, Kellen pressed. If there are living beings? The commander's exoskeleton clicked as he turned to face Kellen fully. The quarantine exists for a reason, Archivist. Some threats are best left buried in history. Before Kellen could respond, the navigation officer announced, exiting hyperspace in 3, 2, 1. The swirling colors disappeared, replaced by the stark blackness of space dotted with stars. Before them hung a yellow star, unremarkable except for the 3rd planet, a blue-green world partially obscured by white clouds. Life-supporting conditions, reported a science officer. Atmosphere contains oxygen, nitrogen, compatible with most Confederacy species. Signal origin confirmed, another officer called out. Coming from the planet's larger moon. Kellen stared at the beautiful world. If his research was correct, this could be a human colony, perhaps one of many hidden away from Xerex influence for millennia. His heart raced at the possibility. Approach the moon, ordered Corzin. Weapons systems on standby. The Astral Inquiry moved forward, accompanied by its escort of 4 military vessels that had dropped all pretense of being research craft. As they drew closer to the moon, a gray, cratered satellite, Kellen noticed something odd about its surface. Magnify Sector 4, he requested. The view screen zoomed in, revealing what appeared to be artificial structures. Not ruins, but functional installations built into the moon's surface. Before anyone could comment, the communication system activated. A voice, unlike any Kellen had heard before, spoke in a language the ship's translators struggled to process. After a moment, the translation came through, the words halting and mechanical. Xerex vessels, you have entered restricted space. Withdraw immediately. The bridge fell silent. It wasn't an automated message. It was a direct communication. Impossible, whispered Corzin. The quarantine is held for 5,000 years. Response? Asked the communications officer. Corzin straightened. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. This system falls under Confederate jurisdiction. A pause, then. We recognize no such jurisdiction. This system belongs to the Terran Preservation Zone. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal or face defensive action. Terran, another word from Kellen's research, an alternative name for humans. Defensive action? Corzin scoffed. Scan for weapons signatures. Nothing detected, reported the tactical officer. Their technology doesn't register on our systems. They're bluffing, Corzin decided. Launch probe drones. Full spectrum analysis of the installations. As the drones deployed, Kellen noticed movement behind the moon, shadows shifting against the stars. Commander, he started to warn, but it was already too late. Ships emerged from behind the moon, dozens of them, then hundreds. Unlike the sleek, organic designs of Confederate vessels, these were angular, utilitarian, bearing scars and modifications that spoke of centuries of adaptation. They moved with precision that suggested either exceptional pilots or advanced automation. Defensive formation, barked Corzin, but his order was cut short as the first salvo struck. The attack was unlike anything in Confederate military doctrine. Instead of targeting weapons or engines, the incoming fire disrupted communication systems, sensor arrays, and navigation computers. Within seconds, the Astral Inquiry and its escorts were effectively blind and mute. "What is this?" demanded Corzin as the bridge lights flickered. "Emergency protocols. Launch." A second volley struck, this time physically damaging the Confederate vessels. The precision was terrifying, weapons hitting exactly where the ships were most vulnerable, as if the attackers had intimate knowledge of Zarek's ship design. The escort vessels exploded one after another, their debris scattering across space. The Astral Inquiry shuddered as its engine core was breached. Alarms wailed as emergency containment fields activated. "Abandon ship," Corzin ordered, his composure finally breaking. "All personnel to escape pods." In the chaos that followed, Kellen managed to reach an escape pod along with several crew members. As they jettisoned away from the dying research vessel, he watched through the viewport as the mysterious fleet encircled the remains of the Confederate force. Not a single attacking vessel had been damaged. The entire engagement had lasted less than 5 minutes. As their pod tumbled through space, its emergency beacon broadcasting distress signals, Kellen knew he was witnessing something momentous. The return of a species that the galaxy's dominant power had tried to erase from history. Humans weren't legends. They were real, and they had just destroyed a Confederate battle group with terrifying efficiency. Hours passed in the cramped escape pod. Of the Astral Inquiry's crew of 300, only 27 had escaped destruction. Commander Corzin wasn't among them. The survivors huddled in shocked silence, their belief in Confederate military supremacy shattered by the swift defeat. Kellen monitored the communication channels, hoping for rescue. Instead, he intercepted fragments of transmissions from the human fleet. They were coordinating, spreading out through the system, and most ominously, sending messages to other systems. They're mobilizing, Kellen realized. This wasn't just a defensive action. It was the beginning of something larger. A young security officer named Tila, her carapace still gleaming with youth, looked at him with confusion. Beginning of what? What were those ships? Who controlled them? Kellen hesitated. Revealing his knowledge would confirm his treason against the Confederacy, but with their ship destroyed and the humans clearly ascendant, Confederacy laws suddenly seemed less relevant. They were human vessels, he said, watching shock spread across the alien faces around him. Humans are not mythological creatures. They were a spacefaring civilization that the Confederacy attempted to eradicate thousands of years ago. "Impossible," said another survivor, a senior science officer. "Humans are legends, cautionary tales. The legends were created to hide the truth," Kellen countered. "I've spent years researching this. The Zarek's Confederacy systematically erased human history because they feared them, and judging by what we just witnessed, with good reason." Before anyone could respond, the pod's sensors detected an approaching vessel. All eyes turned to the viewport as one of the angular human ships drew alongside them. It was smaller than the warships, clearly designed for retrieval operations. "They're going to capture us," whispered Tila. Mechanical arms extended from the human vessel, securing the escape pod. With a metallic groan, they were drawn into a docking bay. As the exterior doors closed behind them, Kellen felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration. He was about to come face to face with beings that officially didn't exist. The pod's hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss. Standing before them were figures in sleek armor that concealed their features. Weapons unlike any Kellen had seen were held at ready positions, though not aimed directly at the survivors. "Exit the pod," came a translated command. "Keep your upper limbs visible at all times." One by one, the survivors emerged. The artificial gravity was slightly stronger than Confederate standard, making their movements awkward. They were directed to a holding area and instructed to sit on benches that lined the walls. For what seemed like hours, they waited under guard. Finally, a new figure entered, still armored, but with their helmet removed, revealing a face that matched the fragments Kellen had discovered in his research. The human was female, her skin a rich brown, hair cropped short against her scalp. Her eyes surveyed the survivors with calculating intensity. When she spoke, her voice carried both authority and weariness. "I am Commander Layla Run of the Terran Defense Force. You are prisoners of war and will be treated according to our protocols." Her gaze fixed on Kellen. "You, the archivist, you're coming with me." Kellen was separated from the others and escorted through corridors that hummed with machinery. The ship's interior was utilitarian but meticulously maintained, with signs of multiple retrofits and upgrades over what must have been centuries. Eventually, they reached what appeared to be a command center. Screens displayed tactical information, star charts, and communications data. Around the room, more humans worked at various stations, some turning to observe Kellen with curious eyes. Commander Wren motioned him to a seat across from her at a central table. "You know what we are," she said. It wasn't a question. Kellen nodded. "Humans, a species supposedly exterminated 5 millennia ago." "Not exterminated," Wren corrected. "Driven back, forced to hide, to survive in the shadows while your Confederacy rewrote history." She leaned forward. "But we never forgot. We never stopped watching. And we never stopped preparing for this day." "What day is this?" Kellen asked, though he feared he already knew. "The day we stop hiding." Wren's expression hardened. "The day we hold the Xerex accountable for their crimes." Kellen's mind raced. "The signal, it was deliberate. You wanted us to come." A thin smile crossed Wren's face. "The first bait in a very large trap. Your expedition's destruction is already being reported across Confederate space. The myth of human extinction is crumbling as we speak. There will be retaliation," Kellen warned. "The Confederacy controls 3,000 species, millions of worlds." "Controls through deception," Wren interrupted. "Through the manipulation of history and the suppression of truth. Once that truth is revealed, how many of those species will remain loyal?" She turned to a nearby console and activated a display. It showed a map of the galaxy, with thousands of points of light representing Confederate worlds. But scattered throughout, previously invisible to Kellen, were hundreds of other markers. "Terran outposts," Wren explained. "Established over millennia. Watching, waiting, building." She highlighted several locations near major Confederate systems. "We have vessels positioned near every significant Confederate military installation. Assets embedded in your central worlds. Technologies you can't detect, let alone counter." The scale of the revelation staggered Kellen. "How? How could this remain hidden for so long?" "Because your leaders declared us legendary. Because they were so convinced of their own success that they never seriously looked for us." Wren's expression showed grim satisfaction. "The greatest military advantage is to be thought dead when you are very much alive." A subordinate approached Run, speaking quietly in her ear. She nodded and returned her attention to Kellen. "The Confederacy has just issued a galaxy-wide alert. They're mobilizing their fleets, calling it a containment action against rogue technological entities. Still unwilling to admit what we really are." She studied him intently. "You knew about us before this mission. How? Kellen hesitated only briefly before explaining his research, his growing suspicions, and his decision to join the expedition. As he spoke, Ren's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching respect. A truth seeker among the architects of lies, she remarked when he finished. Rare, but not unprecedented. Throughout our long exile, we've had contacts within the Confederacy, individuals who questioned the official narrative. What happens now? Kellen asked. Now, Rin stood. Now we move to Phase 2. The Confederacy believes they're facing a small remnant force they can easily crush. They're gathering their fleets for a decisive strike. Her eyes gleamed with anticipation. They have no idea what's really waiting for them. She gestured, and Tugard approached. Take him to observation. He should witness what comes next. As Kellen was escorted away, Commander Rin called after him. You sought the truth, Archivist. Now you'll see it unfold before your eyes. The reckoning 5,000 years in the making. The observation deck provided a panoramic view of space. Through its transparent walls, Kellen watched as hundreds of human vessels assembled in formation, a fleet far larger than the force that had so easily dispatched the Confederate expedition. They're coming, said a voice beside him. Kellen turned to find a human male standing there, older than Run, with gray hair and lines etched into his face. Unlike the others, he wore no uniform, but simple civilian clothing. Professor Eli Voss, the man introduced himself, historian of the Exodus. The Exodus? What your people call the extinction, when we were driven from our homes, forced to retreat beyond known space. Voss moved to stand beside Kellen, gazing out at the assembling fleet. 5,000 years of preparation, all for this moment. Why now? Kellen asked. After so much time. Because we're ready, Voss said simply. For millennia, we rebuilt, hidden in the darkness between stars. We advanced our technology, expanded our population, studied your Confederacy's weaknesses. We needed to be certain that when we returned, it would be decisive. The professor touched a control panel, and the view shifted to a tactical display. It showed Confederate forces, thousands of warships, assembling near the system's hyperspace entry point. The Armada of Righteous Order, Voss commented. The pride of Confederate military might. 10,000 vessels, crews drawn from 30 loyal species, commissioned with one purpose, to eliminate the human threat once and for all. He smiled thinly. Again, they'll destroy this system, Kellen said. They have planet killers. They'll try, Voss agreed. But their weapons are known to us. Their tactics anticipated. Their technology surpassed centuries ago. He turned to Kellen. Tell me, Archivist, in your research, did you discover why the Confederacy feared humanity enough to attempt genocide? Kellen shook his head. Those records were the most thoroughly purged. I found only fragments suggesting humans possess technologies considered dangerous. It wasn't our technology they feared, Voss said. It was our adaptability, our unpredictability, our refusal to accept limitations. His eyes narrowed. The Xerx built their empire on control, of resources, of information, of thought itself. Humans represented chaos to their ordered galaxy. We asked questions they didn't want asked. We challenged assumptions they held sacred. And for that, they tried to destroy you, Kellen whispered. For that, they launched what they called the Purification War. Thousands of human worlds were bombarded, billions killed. Earth itself was attacked with weapons that rendered it uninhabitable for centuries. Voss's voice remained steady, but Kellen could sense the ancient rage beneath his words. Those who survived fled, scattered, hid. But we never surrendered, and we never forgot. A tremor ran through the ship as it engaged its engines. Around them, the human fleet began to move, not toward the approaching Confederate Armada, but away from the Author's system. We're retreating? Kellen asked, confused. Voss smiled, a cold expression devoid of humor. No, we're changing the battlefield. The Confederacy expects us to make our stand here, to defend this system. They've committed their forces accordingly. He gestured to the tactical display, where the human fleet was splitting into multiple groups, each heading in different directions. But while they concentrate their might here, we will strike at the heart of their power. Understanding dawned on Kellen. Elian Prime, the Confederate capital world. Voss nodded. Home to the High Council, the archives of order, and most importantly, the central data repositories containing the true historical records the Confederacy has kept hidden for millennia. But Elian is the most heavily defended system in the galaxy, Kellen protested. Orbital platforms, planetary shields, dedicated defense fleets. All designed to repel external threats, Voss interrupted. But what if the threat was already inside? He tapped the display, highlighting dozens of points throughout the Elian system. Infiltration units dormant for centuries. Sleeper agents embedded in key positions. Defense override protocols extracted from your own secure networks. Kellen stared at the display in horror and amazement. The scale of human planning was beyond anything he could have imagined. A revenge plot spanning millennia, executed with patience that defied comprehension. When the Confederacy realizes their mistake, it will be too late, Voss continued. Their military might is gathered here, days away from their capital. By the time they can respond, Elian will be ours. And with it, the truth they've buried for so long. And then what? Kellen asked. Will you destroy them as they try to destroy you? Voss regarded him thoughtfully. What do you think we should do, Archivist? You who have dedicated your life to truth. Kellen considered the question carefully. Justice, not vengeance, he finally said. Expose their crimes, hold the guilty accountable, but don't punish entire species for the actions of their leaders. A genuine smile spread across Voss's face. Well spoken, and closer to our intentions than you might think. He gestured toward a door. Gulme, Commander Wren wishes you to join the command group for the journey to Elian. Your knowledge of Confederate protocols may prove useful. As they departed the observation deck, Kellen glanced back at the tactical display. The Confederate Armada, thousands of ships strong, was advancing into an empty system, their overwhelming might rendered irrelevant by human strategic foresight. The game had been rigged from the start, Kellen realized. The Confederacy was fighting the last war, sending their forces to crush a threat they thought they understood. But humans had been planning this moment for 5,000 years, and they had no intention of fighting according to Confederate expectations. The journey to the Elian system took just hours, a fraction of the time Kellen expected. The human vessels utilized a hyperspace technology far more advanced than Confederate equivalents, traveling along pathways that Confederate sensors couldn't detect. In the command center of the flagship, identified as the Remembrance, Kellen watched as Commander Wren coordinated the multi-pronged assault. Her comm efficiency was matched by her officers, who executed complex maneuvers with practiced precision. Emergence in 5 minutes, announced the navigation officer. All vessels report ready status. Wren turned to address the assembled command staff. 5,000 years ago, our ancestors made a promise that humanity would return, that truth would prevail, that justice would be served. Today, we fulfill that promise. She nodded to a communications officer. Activate all sleeper units. Throughout the Elian system, dormant human assets, technological, biological, and hybrid, awaken to their programmed tasks. Defense systems mysteriously failed. Communications networks experienced critical outages. Sensor arrays reported false data or nothing at all. By the time the human fleet emerged from hyperspace, Elian's vaunted defenses were already compromised. The few Confederate vessels present responded in confusion, their coordinated defense plans rendered useless by the systematic disruption of their command structure. Kellen stood transfixed as the battle, if it could even be called that, unfolded on the command center's displays. Human ships moved with perfect coordination, neutralizing Confederate vessels with precision strikes that disabled rather than destroyed when possible. Within an hour, space around Elian Prime was secured, with minimal casualties on either side. Ground phase initiating, reported a tactical officer. Resistance minimal. The High Council, Wren asked, located and contained within the spire of governance. They have not been harmed. Rin nodded with satisfaction. Prepare for surface deployment. I want the archive secured immediately. She turned to Kellen. You'll accompany the archive team. Your expertise will be valuable in identifying the most significant historical records. You're not destroying them? Kellen asked, surprised. Destroy knowledge? Rin looked genuinely offended. We're not the Xerex archivist. We don't erase history, we restore it. The descent to Elian's surface was surreal. The capital city, which just hours before had been the secure center of Confederate power, now stood quiet, its streets empty as citizens sheltered in their homes. Occasional firefights erupted where Confederate loyalists attempted resistance, but these were quickly suppressed by human forces using non-lethal technologies. The Great Archive, Kellen's former workplace, had been secured without a shot fired. The senior archivists, recognizing the futility of resistance, had surrendered immediately, providing access codes to even the most restricted sections. This way, Kellen directed the human team through the labyrinthine repository. The historical truth vault contains the original records, the unaltered history the Confederacy preserved while distributing sanitized versions to the public. The vault's massive doors, designed to withstand orbital bombardment, stood open, their security measures having failed precisely when needed. Inside, data crystals lined the walls, each containing centuries of meticulously preserved information. Here, Kellen indicated a section labeled Pre-Unification Conflicts. This would contain the records of the Purification War, what the humans call the Exodus. Professor Voss, who had joined the archive team, approached reverently. After all this time, he murmured, running his fingers along the crystal containers. The truth, preserved by the very people who denied it. Working swiftly, human technicians extracted the data, copying it into their own systems. Other teams spread throughout the vast archive, systematically preserving the unaltered historical record in its entirety. Why did they keep these? Asked one of the human soldiers, gesturing to the overwhelming volume of suppressed information. If they wanted to erase history, why preserve it at all? Because knowledge is power, Kellen answered. The Xerex understand this better than anyone. They don't destroy information, they control it. Everything here informs their decisions, shapes their strategies, while the public receives only what supports continued Confederate dominance. Well, that ends today, said Voss, holding up a data crystal containing the complete record of human-Confederate relations. This will be broadcast throughout the galaxy, the unaltered truth for all species to witness. As the archival team completed their work, Kellen received a summons to the Spire of Governance, the seat of Confederate power now under human control. Escorted through the ornate halls where the fate of thousands of worlds had been decided for millennia, he felt a profound sense of witnessing history's pivot point. In the High Council chamber, Commander Rin stood before the assembled counselors, the 12 most powerful individuals in the Confederacy, now prisoners in their own chambers. Archon Vexorati, supreme leader of the Confederacy, sat in the center, his posture rigid with defiance despite his circumstances. Archivist Varn. The Archon acknowledged Kellen as he entered. I see treason prospers today. Not treason, Archon, Kellen replied. A search for truth. Truth is what maintains order, Zarati snapped. What prevents chaos? What these creatures would destroy with their return. Commander Run, who had been silent, finally spoke. The truth, Archon Zarati, is that 5,000 years ago, your predecessors attempted to exterminate my species because we represented a challenge to your dominance. When that failed, you erased us from history, quarantined our territories, and told the galaxy we were myths. She activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. It showed recordings from the historical Truth Vault, unaltered footage of the initial conflicts between humans and the early Confederacy. This is not some fabrication, Ruin continued as the council watched the evidence of their ancestors' crimes unfold before them. These are your own records, the same history you've hidden from your people, from all people, for 5 millennia. The recordings showed Confederate fleets bombarding human worlds, civilian populations being systematically eradicated, and finally, the devastating attack on Earth itself. The clinical precision with which the genocide had been executed was chilling. 3 billion dead in the first month alone, Rin stated flatly. 17 billion by the end of the first year. 96% of known human territory sterilized. All because we refused to submit to Confederate guidance of our development. Archon Zarati's composure finally cracked. It was necessary. Humans were expanding too rapidly, developing technologies without proper ethical constraints, challenging established hierarchies. We were living freely, Rin cut him off. That was our only crime. She switched the display to show a different recording. The High Council of 5,000 years ago, debating the human problem. An ancient Xerex counselor spoke. They advance too quickly. Their adaptability threatens the stable order we have established. If left unchecked, within a century, they will surpass us. Within 2, they could dominate us. The humans must be contained or eliminated, while we still hold the advantage. The recording ended, leaving the chamber in silence. Your civilization was built on genocide, Rin said quietly. Your authority maintained through lies. Your peace preserved by suppressing the truth. She looked at each counselor in turn. And now you will answer for it. What will you do? Demanded Zarati. Execute us? Replace one tyranny with another? No, Rin replied. We will do what you feared most. We will tell the truth. She gestured, and human soldiers brought forward communication equipment. You will witness as the unaltered historical record is transmitted to every world in the Confederacy. Every species will learn what really happened, not just to humans, but to any civilization that challenged Xerex dominance. Kellen stepped forward. Commander, if I may? Rin nodded, and Kellen addressed the council. His former masters, now diminished by the exposure of their lies. I studied our history for years, sensing the inconsistencies, the deliberate omissions. I believe most citizens of the Confederacy have felt the same unease, knowing that something was missing from the narrative we were given. He looked at his former mentor, Elder Thaxis, who sat among the council with his head bowed. We deserved better than comforting lies. All species deserved the dignity of truth. Thaxis finally spoke, his voice weary. We believed we were protecting the galaxy, that some truths were too dangerous. The only dangerous truth, Kellen replied, is that power corrupts and that those who control information control everything else. Commander Rin signaled, and throughout the Confederacy, the transmission began. On thousands of worlds, citizens watched as their understanding of history was rewritten, not by new propaganda, but by the revelation of what had been hidden from them. The human occupation of Elian Prime lasted just 3 days. They secured the capital, broadcasted the historical records, and then, to the shock of the Confederate leadership, prepared to depart. You're leaving? Kellen asked as he watched human forces boarding their vessels. After all this? Commander Run, overseeing the withdrawal from the Remembrance's bridge, nodded. Our mission was never conquest, Kellen. It was justice through truth. We've accomplished that. But the Confederacy will never be the same, she finished for him. Already, dozens of species are declaring independence. The Xerex monopoly on power is broken forever. She gestured to displays showing protests and uprisings spreading across Confederate space. What comes next should be determined by the people of this galaxy, not by us. Professor Voss joined them, carrying a small data crystal. This is for you, he said, handing it to Kellen. A complete record of human history, where we came from, what happened to us, and what we became during our exile. The first truly accurate account available in the Confederacy in 5 millennia. Kellen accepted it with reverence. What will happen to the council? They will face justice, Rin said. Not our justice, but that of the peoples they've ruled. Trials are already being organized by a coalition of species. The age of Xerex dominance is over. And what of humanity? Kellen asked. Will you return to Confederate space? Rin and Voss exchanged glances. Not yet, Voss answered. We've changed during our long exile, developed differently. Reintegration will take time. He smiled slightly. But we'll be watching. And this time, we won't be forgotten. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Kellen was given a choice. Remain on Elian Prime to help guide the transition to a post-Confederate galaxy, or accompany the humans to learn more about the civilization that had survived against all odds. For Kellen, there was no hesitation. I've spent my life searching for hidden truths, he told Commanderin. I would be honored to learn directly from those who preserved it. The Remembrance departed Elian Prime amid a formation of human vessels, a fraction of their total force, but still an awesome display of the power that had remained hidden for so long. As they accelerated toward the hyperspace threshold, Kellen stood on the observation deck, watching the capital world recede. Professor Voss joined him, his expression contemplative. You know, throughout our exile, there were many who advocated for a different kind of return, one of fire and vengeance, of making the Xerex suffer as we had suffered. What changed their minds? Kellen asked. Time, perspective, Voss sighed, and the realization that becoming like our enemies would mean they had truly destroyed what made us human. He turned to Kellen. Revenge is easy. Justice is harder. Wisdom is hardest of all. The ship entered hyperspace, the stars stretching into streams of light. Ahead lay human space, dozens of worlds built or terraformed in secret, entire generations born and raised beyond Confederate knowledge. Behind lay a galaxy forever changed by the return of a legendary species. What happens now? Kellen asked. Voss smiled, a genuine expression of hope, not the cold satisfaction of earlier days. Now we all face the future honestly. No more legends. No more lies. He gestured toward the hyperspace corridor. Just truth, with all its complexity and challenge. And all its possibility, Kellen added. Yes, agreed Voss. All its possibility. 3 months later, Kellen stood before an assembly unlike any in galactic history. Representatives from over 2,000 species, formerly under Confederate rule, now determining their own paths, had gathered on neutral territory to establish a new framework for interstellar relations. Humans were present too, not as conquerors, but as equals. Their delegation, led by Commander Run, offered technological and scientific knowledge freely, reversing millennia of isolation. Kellen had been asked to address the assembly as both witness and historian. As he looked out at the gathered representatives, some familiar, many utterly alien, he felt the weight of the moment. For 5,000 years, he began, we lived in a galaxy defined by secrets. The Xerex Confederacy rose to power not primarily through military might, but through the control of information. They determined what was remembered and what was forgotten, what was studied and what was forbidden. He activated a display showing the human fleet's arrival at Elian Prime, the moment when truth had returned to the galaxy in force. The humans were written out of our history, transformed from a civilization into a cautionary myth. But they survived, they remembered, and when they returned, they brought with them not just superior firepower, but something far more powerful. They brought truth. Murmurs spread through the assembly as translation systems conveyed his words to each species in their native language. The old Confederacy is gone, Kellen continued. Its leadership stands trial for crimes spanning millennia. But we face a critical question. What will replace it? Will we build something better on the ruins of deception? Or will we simply exchange one form of power for another? He gestured toward the human delegation. Our human friends have shown remarkable restraint. Having achieved total military victory, they chose not to rule, but to reveal. Having been victimized, they chose justice over vengeance. Their example offers us a path forward. Kellen held up the data crystal Professor Voss had given him. This contains the true history of humanity, their origins, their near destruction, their survival. I have been studying it these past months, and I found within it a concept that I believe should guide our new interstellar community, transparency. He projected additional images, scenes from human history, their struggles and triumphs, their diversity and resilience. Transparency in governance. Transparency in science. Transparency in history. No more buried truths. No more convenient lies. No more legends masquerading as fact. Kellen's voice grew stronger. The Xerx feared human unpredictability, their tendency to question and challenge. But these are not flaws to be suppressed. They are strengths to be embraced by all sentient beings. The assembly erupted in approval. Thousands of voices, some harmonic, some discordant, all united in affirmation. Later, as the delegates dispersed to continue their discussions, Commander Wren approached Kellen. "Impressive speech," she said. "You've become quite the orator." Kellen smiled. "I've had excellent teachers in the art of speaking truth." They walked together through the diplomatic complex, past representatives of species that had been enemies just months before, now engaged in cautious cooperation. "The trials begin next week," Wren mentioned. "The Archon and High Council will face judgment for their actions." "Will you testify?" "I will," Kellen confirmed. "Not for vengeance, but for record. The galaxy needs to understand how thoroughly truth can be manipulated, so it never happens again." Wren nodded, then handed him a small device. "This came for you." From Elian Prime. Kellen activated it, revealing a message from his former mentor, Elder Thaxis, now under house arrest awaiting trial. Kellen, the old archivist's holographic image, spoke, his once commanding voice now subdued. "I was wrong. For centuries, I believed I served knowledge by controlling it. I told myself that stability required management of facts. The ancient Xerexi sighed heavily. I see now that I was complicit in something unforgivable." Thaxis's image leaned closer. "But you never accepted the comfortable lie. You sought truth despite the cost. You are what a true archivist should be." A pause. "I am proud of you, though I have no right to be. The future belongs to those like you, who understand that knowledge serves no master but truth itself." The message ended, leaving Kellen momentarily speechless. "Are you all right?" Wren asked. Kellen nodded slowly. "He taught me everything about knowledge management, except the most important lesson." He pocketed the device. "That truth, however uncomfortable, must be preserved. A lesson my people learned the hard way," Wren said. 5,000 years in exile gave us perspective. They reached a viewport that offered a stunning view of the neutral world where the assembly was being held. Ships from 100 species orbited peacefully, a sight impossible under Confederate rule, where different civilizations were deliberately kept separate and suspicious of one another. "Your speech mentioned transparency as the foundation for our new interstellar relations," Wren said. "But foundation for what?" Kellen considered the question. "Something better. Something that values diversity instead of fearing it. Something that embraces questions instead of suppressing them." He turned to her. "Something more human." Wren smiled, the expression still rare for the commander who had carried the weight of her people's justice for so long. "We've been called many things across the millennia. Legendary is new. I rather like it." "Not legendary," Kellen corrected. "Real, and that's far more important." Above them, the stars shone on a galaxy transformed, not by force of arms, but by the revelation of truth long hidden. The Xerx Confederacy, built on secrets and control, had been undone not primarily by the human fleet, but by the power of history honestly told. Somewhere in those stars, billions of beings were learning their true past for the first time, questioning what they had been taught, and beginning to imagine a future built on something stronger than deception. That transformation, from acceptance to questioning, from submission to self-determination, was the true victory. The legends had returned, and with them, a future unwritten by controlling hands, undefined by ancient agendas. A future where history was not dictated, but discovered, where knowledge was not hoarded, but shared. Kellen Varn, once a keeper of sanctioned truths, now stood as a witness to a galaxy awakening. The archivist had become the chronicler of humanity's return and the Confederacy's fall. But more importantly, he had become something the galaxy had lacked for millennia, an honest historian, recording not what power demanded, but what actually occurred. As he watched ships depart for newly independent worlds, carrying the unaltered records of their histories, Kellen understood that the humans had given the galaxy something far more valuable than vengeance. They had given memory. They had given it truth. And with truth came freedom, not just from Zarek's rule, but from the tyranny of manufactured history. The legends were legend no more, and the galaxy would never forget again.